Okay, what you see here is, this is a different section. This is an old sample book that I put together. This is one of the first ones I put together. All the better ones somehow grew legs. Now I'm in the process of putting together another one. It's going to change slightly, but what will be section 1 is on visual communications theory, which is what I wanted to address today, and there's some samples in here. It's best to understand visual communication, the different theories that explain how we communicate visually, in other words, how we understand what we see. And some of the more popular ones that we really zero in on is Gestalt theory, or the symbiotics, the study of the science of signs and the meaning in signs. And so you can see here that there are 9 entries. You'll be able to print out all of these section pages within a week or so when I finalized everything. That will explain all the different kinds of samples that you need to come up with. This is one of the ways for me to understand that you understand what we're talking about. If you really understand Gestalt theory, you should be able to find an example of that where Gestalt theory would explain very clearly and very obviously the meaning of what you see. Now, Gestalt theory is used in everything, but sometimes most of the time it's pretty subtle. But when we define, for example, Gestalt theory is the sum of the whole thing together has greater meaning than the sum of all the pieces of that whole. Or put another way is it's called synergism. 1 plus 1 is greater than 2. Follow me? So when you can see things being assembled and they form a whole, that's better. That's pretty obvious. For example, here's an example, and it's I can't zoom out enough to show you, so I'm going to have to show you in pieces. Okay? See this page here? It's from a magazine, and you can see it's kind of dark. And let me pull these things out here for a second. It might work better if I don't move the entire book, but I can move just the pages, okay? So here we have this page. It's working out better too. Pretty thick book. Because of the thickness of the book, it's putting it like 3 inches closer to the lens, right? So, okay. Here we go. In fact, I think I'll read it better. Yes. There is a page, left-handed page. It's called a verso. Verso, V-E-R-S-O, is the left-handed page. And here's the something from the right-handed page. Now, I cut this part out right here, if you can see that. But right here was some background. But I didn't need that. But notice, see how these are connected here? This is a cable that goes from one side to the next. So it unifies the two pieces. It's kind of a clever way of putting an ad together, because you can't fit it on one page, so you put it on 2 pages, but you don't want to pay for 2 pages, right? And so if you get the publisher to go along with it, you're like, what the heck is this, right? You're trying to figure out, what is that? Because that's the first thing you look at, right? It just doesn't make sense. Your mind says, that's weird. Now, one of the principles of Gestalt is continuity. Our mind wants to put things together so things are continuous. They're not disjointed. You know, when you look at a fence, a picket fence, and one of the pickets is missing, you look at that, don't you? It draws your attention because it breaks the pattern. Because you want to make it a pattern. So you look there because it's not trying to make sense of, oh, there's a picket missing. Normally the fence would be consistent. And we do this so naturally. But when we understand simple explanations like that, simple samples, then more complicated ones can make sense to us. And so we're taking advantage here of, hey, I'm just going to buy, they buy so many column inches or square inches. And you add up all the image for their ad, and it's a lot less than 2 pages. But they, in a very clever way, can get you to connect the two together. And you're literally, in your mind, picking up the end of the cable and putting it into the car. How it draws you in. So this would be a great example here of Gestalt theory. Now, also, so, you know, the continuity part of it, but that has meaning, doesn't it? And this has meaning. But together, it means a lot more, doesn't it? So, see what this is a great example of Gestalt theory. Study a little bit more about it, and you know, go on the internet, become a little bit more expert on it. And okay, second thing we're going to talk about are semiotics. A semiotics is the study of signs. Okay, and there are three classifications of signs. Icons. We call them, fancy word, iconic semiotic. But basically it's an icon. And you think icons on your computer screen, right? Why do they call them icons? Because they're usually pictures that have some meaning. An icon of a garbage can. Do I need to explain to you what that means? No, you trash things. That's probably where you throw things away, right? Makes sense. Well, thumbnail, or thumbprint, fingerprint. Everybody has them. Everybody in the civilized world has seen fingerprints. They know what they are. When you see this particular sign, what does it represent to you? Maybe personal identity, right? Maybe security. In these days, it can mean security. It has a meaning, right? You can add more meaning to it, but we know what that means. Everybody understands it. It's an icon. Same with a phone. How many people use a phone like this today? Anybody still have one of these? Yeah, go to Salvation Army or Goodwill, you know, you might see one of these once in a while. Or an antique store, okay? We don't use these anymore, but you'll see this as a symbol of what? Yeah, call, contact. You don't need to have that explained to you, do you? So these are icons. Next one is the indexical semiotic, or an index, you know, plural, indices. Just like an index will list a bunch of items and then reference to where you can look in the publication or elsewhere to find that particular one, it's a reference to it. It's not the real thing. It's just kind of a label that points you to the thing. So an index has that kind of meaning. It's a sign of the real thing. It gives you directions. Well, what do you think this little graphic here was put together to mean? Nobody puts a house on a burner. It obviously means something. What? A house means, it's kind of an icon, isn't it? It's a home. Place where you live, right? And a burner has some sort of meaning, right? Source of heat. You cook, right? So when you put these things together, you could say, well, this is good Gestalt theory because the two together have some more meaning than them separate, right? But you can say it's also an index, indicating something you can't really see. How do they show that the housing market is heating up? See? A more subtle example, and really what indexes are about, is when you see something that's evidence of something else that you don't see. A reflection in the water, or a shadow of something. The real thing that's being reflected or shadowed is off the picture, but you know what it is. Why? Well, you have experience in life, right? And you can associate these kind of things and can figure out that it's a clue to something off the screen. So you use this indexical semiotic as a graphic that has some meaning. Somebody was asking me, I was down at the beach. I was up in Reno area. What's the name of that big lake up there? Big lake north of that. Pyramid Lake. Okay, I was out there, okay, playing around. Somebody says, hey, have you seen my dog? There's a dog that was down here. And I said, no, I haven't seen the dog, but I saw some dog prints over there. See that? That was a sign that there was a dog, but I don't know if it was his dog. See, that's a semiotic, right? It's a sign, but it's an index. An indexical semiotic. Does that make sense? Okay. And of course, the third type are symbols, which you're familiar with. Okay? You might say this is an icon. Gosh, everybody knows that means a woman. Next week we're going to talk about the history of graphic communications. Pictographs. This is a modern day pictograph, which is a graphic that represents a noun. Woman. Right? We have, and a pictogram is like a symbol. You have to learn what that means. You ever go up to Red Rock and try to see the pictographs up there? Can you read them? No, you have to learn what they mean. They're symbols. You know, anybody can read Russian? It's acrylic language. How about Sanskrit? You know, how about Arabic? They don't use the Roman characters that we do. They're different symbols. But once you learn that, oh, that means this, like a kanji, oh, that means this word. Or this little thing means that letter. You can then start constructing meaning. So icons, you have to learn what they mean. When McDonald's first came out, you had to learn what the double arches meant. Now it's an icon. See? So using this as an icon, somebody kind of took that idea, and it's a symbol. But you could probably figure out what that means, right? Maybe not. So you read a little bit of the verbal. A little embarrassed to talk about the doctor and your bladder control problem? Bladder control associated with the restroom, right? What's the audience they're trying to reach here? Women. Women with bladder problems. Okay? Okay? Symbols. See how the symbols are used? Another one of the theories is ecological theory. Now you could say, there's some symbols here of the beach, and they're indexical, aren't they? Not symbols, a sign. There's an indexical sign here. What? What tells you this is a beach?
The water.
What water?
It's water.
How do you know that's water? Maybe it's an oil spill. Oil surfers, okay, but they might be running across the parking lot with oil spill there, right, to the beach. Foam on the edge, right? Waves make foam, don't they? Yeah, so that kind of says something, right? So, and then how do you know they're surfers? Well, if you just cover up the surfer here, and suppose you just saw that. Oh, look, it's a 3 martini lunch. Okay, right? Is that what that is? Little olive on a toothpick, right? If that's all you saw, but you start learning a little more. Ecological theory says because of our experience with the ecology, the environment around us, and what we see, we associate certain things with. So we can tell because of understanding what certain environments look like that that's not snow in a mountaintop. It's cropped very tightly to add interest, which is to kind of zero in on these 3 here, right? But just enough to give you, using ecological theory, it gives you just enough information so you can really figure out what's going on without a lot of, what is all of that? Because you might maybe play with a curiosity and get them involved, but you don't want to play with them too much. There's this general rule, I'll be repeating this over and over again, and this rule is you want to make it as easy as possible for your audience to get the message. Sometimes the message they have to work for because that's part of the message. Right? Say you had an article on searching for clues to discover your ancestors. And somehow it was set up that there was a little clue or something you had to figure out that message. And then, oh, I got it. They kind of hooked you emotionally, haven't they? Because they gave you a little experience of finding the clues. But most of the time, good book to read. It's geared to those web designers where usability is very important. The book is titled, Please Don't Make Me Think. Do you want to go to a web page and have to think? No, you don't. Okay, where the heck is the home button? Okay, where's the search button? Oh, they're calling it look it up. Like everybody else says, search. Use what people understand. Don't make them work. That's kind of the idea. So if you understand certain things, you can get their attention and make it interesting, be creative, but don't make it so it's hard for them to get the message. Question?
Is this theory always have to be like the environment?
No, but the idea is that people are explaining that everything we look at is the environment. You're in a classroom. This is a classroom environment. Okay? And you can tell certain things by your experience with the environment. We could do a whole class on visual communication theories. We could talk all day just about this one. I just want you to understand it enough because there's just lots of different ways of explaining how we get it. Because if you don't know as a communicator how people get it, you're going to just, I'm going to be creative and all that, but you're going to make people think too much or you're going to drive them away. Remember, you guys are not artists. You're communicators. You got to use the art, this particular piece of art, in a way that fulfills your mission to get the message across. In this case, it drives their attention to it and helps them understand a little bit about what's going on.
All the theories that you want for sample, are you going to send it to us?
The book talks briefly about these different theories to give you an idea. If it's still not enough, examples that I'll be bringing up can supplement it. Or there's this thing called the internet, and you can use a search engine to find lots of good stuff. Yeah. If you really want to learn something, say, I'm going to make a list of ways people, different kinds of theories that explain how people see things. And you start doing research and start making and organizing things. What a great way to learn. Forming lists. So anyway, here's one, cognitive theory. What does cognitive mean? Anyone? Cognition?
Compilation of a whole bunch of pieces of information.
Compilation of a whole bunch of different pieces of information?
Yeah.
No. Well, it may involve that. There's a theory called constructivism, where you've got a lot of different pieces that work together to build something. Well, that sounds a lot like Gestalt theory, right? But, they all explain the same thing, how we get stuff, how we understand it. But constructivism means that you put all the pieces together and then you get the message. And then, of course, Gestalt says, the whole then therefore has more meaning. But how did you get the whole meaning? Constructivism says you build it piece at a time. And sometimes that involves you lace things out and how the eye flows. You don't have to have your eye all over the place trying to construct something. So if you're a photographer, you learn the principle of flow. And then as the eye flows through the picture, it picks up and constructs what the meaning is. But if the picture's just your eyes all over the place to build meaning, it's not working. Humans are pretty smart. I think they're smarter than monkeys in most cases. At least outside the classroom, I've noticed that. And they can probably figure it out even though it's hard to. But the problem with humans is they don't have time to. That's your job. You're the communicator / designer. Your job is to put it together so that they can very quickly get it. Okay, cognition is just recognizing things, becoming aware of them. Cognitive disorder is you can't think properly. There's all kinds of psychological disorders that deals with cognition. You've probably heard of dyslexia. Your brain. We see things upside down in reverse, and then our mind turns it around so we can look at it. But if something's wrong, then weird things happen. Our cognition is off. So that's what cognition is about. And the definition that, excuse me, on one of the pages on this week, it has a list with a very, very brief description of what each of the theories are. And cognition is perception involves a myriad of mental processes. Interpretation. And take a look at this picture here. Do you understand the meaning of this without reading anything verbal? Okay? Just the visual information. Can you understand what's going on here by interpretation, memory, comparison, salience, how relative is it? Association, inventory, against things that you already know about. Analysis and recognition. See, all these different cognitive mental processes we have come together here. Mirror represents reflection, right? And that old hand and that old face can represent age, right? But why is her face out of focus? So you're trying to pull all these things together. Why would you say that?
Because it's all blurry and she's old.
But she's looking at it. You are her. She's looking at herself, but it's blurred. Maybe it's about optometry. But why the old person? What happens with old people? Things start fading and get blurry and you lose details. Alzheimer's is what this is about. You may not get that, but when you start reading about this, starting with the drop cap there, not all of Dr. Richard Matthews' elderly patients have Alzheimer's disease. Maybe that's all you want to read, but immediately the verbal tells you what the visual said, right? They support each other, don't they? Really hits home. How much more information is now in that picture now that you know a little bit about it? Okay? Pleasant face, somewhat content, maybe a little confused. You start seeing a lot of stuff in there, don't you, that you didn't before. Okay? Picture worth 1,000 words. It's worth a lot. It's worth 10,000 words when you know a little bit about it. And if the picture doesn't match up with the words and it becomes confused, you feel cheated. Except for guys who see a picture of a girl in a bikini and they don't care what the article's about. Right? They look at it in front of the car. It's about the car. Now, for me, get out of the way. I want to see the car. Okay? Get the dumb broad with no clothing off so I can see the car. But that's not what the audience wants, is it? See? But it's an extreme example of you're not going to reach the audience that doesn't care about the girl. Because it doesn't tie in. You follow me? Sometimes we do this an awful lot. You have said, well, this is cool, I'm going to add that in, and it's just a distraction because it doesn't tie into the message.
So this is something like marketing where you target a particular audience and everything should be focused and driven towards that specific group?
Marketing is just one way of communicating, which we talk about at the end of the course. But you're right. Communicating, you described that, is a way of targeting an audience. In marketing, you have to know who the audience is there. And you have demographics, their age, their sex, gender, their education, their income, their other social, economic indicators. So you know who you're reaching so that the talk, the speech, the writing, the pictures, all that targets them. Now, somebody not in that audience, could they still be interested? Sure, it's not excluding those, but for the most part it might because it's not your audience. When we talked about the communication model, understand your audience. Okay, so this is a really good one here. Because, when I pull the full picture up, if you were to see Alzheimer's unlocked, that picture ties right in, doesn't it? You immediately know what are we talking about. If I just said Alzheimer's unlocked and start reading about it, is it as interesting? You just see that? Verbal and visual really need to work together. The more they do, and it's very clever. How about if you had a padlock on there and an old hand unlocking it? Would that be as appropriate? Okay, unlock, you're unlocking it, and the whole person's trying to unlock. It's kind of in the ballpark, isn't it? But it's still a little off, isn't it?
It's not as creative.
Yeah, maybe a little more trite. Yeah, not as creative. One of the assignments you're going to work on, probably the most difficult assignment, is where you're going to have to communicate a message without any words, just with visuals.
Would you photograph?
Oh yeah, use anything you can do, but no words. And you'll see how difficult it is to communicate just visually. And how wonderful it is that the verbiage, the type, can really drive home what you're trying to say. Okay, there is another theory. Huxley-Lester model. These were named after the two people. You ever heard of Aldous? What is it? Alden Huxley? Aldous. Aldous. Aldous?
Yeah.
I never noticed that, but Aldous is A-L-D-U-S?
L-D-O-U-S.
Because Aldous Manutius is the father of publishing. We'll talk about that. In design, Adobe is the leading software program, but before that there was PageMaker by Aldous Corporation. They named it after him, so that's why I drew a blank here. Always trying to make connections to things. Okay, but he's the one that worked together with Lester, and they came up with this way of explaining something. Now, how do you know what this means? Well, without reading the copy, what is this about? This picture?
Using dance.
It says about music,
Art.
Music,
Performing arts.
dancing.
performing arts.
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
Okay, why'd you say music?
There's
Instruments, notes.
Okay, and then as you look a little bit more, what did you see? Ballet slippers. Now hold it. How does that tie into music? It uses music, doesn't it? Oh, and then you got a hand with a paintbrush. Hold it, that's not music. He probably uses iPods in his what he's painting it, but what's the connection? So it's more than that. So what are you doing? You're constructing the message, aren't you, as you pick up more and more pieces of information. But this is not an example of constructivism, though it could be. See, constructivism is visual blueprinting, relating a pattern of shapes or visual arrangement in a series of planes together, which sounds very esoteric. That's the official name, but basically you're arranging everything together to have some meaning. Oh, that sounds like Gestalt. That sounds, they're all necessarily very similar, but it's just how they explain how we see these things. But what Huxley and Lester came up with is the more you know about something, the more you see. Remember that previous one with the Alzheimer? Once you knew it was about Alzheimer, now you saw more, right? See, Lester Huxley would explain, with that headline and the picture together, that explains more and you see more. Once you know this is about performing arts, you start seeing all kinds of detail, don't you? Yeah, right over here. Did you ever pick up on that one? It's kind of small, playing a little string instrument of some sort. In other words, sight and thought are inseparable. That's how this is explained. And then one last one. Omniphasism. Can you say omniphasism? What does omni mean?
Everything or all?
Okay. You're a carnivore, you're a vegetarian, or an omnivore. Both. Phases. Phasism. Both phases. What phases are we talking about here? There's a balance between reasoning and intuition, logic and creativity. We have two sides of our brains, don't we? One does the math and the other one paints the pictures. And we're heavier on one side or the other usually. And so the two primary cognitive activities of the human mind is that of reasoning stuff through, and then intuition. Or put another way is thought and emotion. Art's about emotion. Communicating is about reason or facts. There's just two ways of looking at everything. And what this does is, and here's a good example why. Because you can reason here by the symbols, broken glass, the guy's looking through a hole, heavy beard. What's that saying here?
He's a crook.
He's a burglar, huh? That's your reasoning. But Is there any emotional response you have from that? Security or vulnerability, or so you get other things from your intuition, don't you? It works both together very strong. In fact, you'll learn that when you get emotion of the audience involved, you communicate better about that. Most of the things you remember as a little kid were fairly emotional. For traumatic things, sometimes we remember a lot better than just the mundane. And same thing here. The butterflies and the frilly dress. See the feeling involved in there? But you can reason a little bit what's going on here. It's just a shoot of some sort for selling a dress. But both sides of the main two cognitive operations of the brain are being used here, aren't they?